We're here in the Spanish Pavilion. This is VernissageTV, and I'm standing here with Katja Garcia Anton. She is the curator of the Spanish Pavilion here in Venice at the Biennale. Katja Garcia Anton has curated the pavilion with the Spanish artist Dora Garcia. And the exhibition here is called Lo Inadecuado,
That's right.
the inadequate.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about the project?
Yes, well, the title came about from the moment of actually inviting Dora to represent Spain in the Spanish Pavilion in the Venice Biennale, and she felt extremely uncomfortable at this idea. You have to understand that Spain, since the Civil War, and probably even before that, was a country very much divided in its identity, but particularly after the Civil War. And so it's very much ingrained in the culture of Spain to feel very uncomfortable when anybody tries to say Spain and you represent Spain. So the first thing is that made her feel incredibly uncomfortable. But secondly, there's also just simply an aesthetic and artistic reflection that as an artist, she felt very uncomfortable having to represent a whole artistic community. So,
and for the people who don't know the surroundings, the Spanish Pavilion is really the first one on the left side when you enter the Giardini.
Exactly.
So a very important place maybe as well.
Exactly. And so in the end, having thought about it, she thought, okay, well, this sense of uncomfortableness, this sense of not fitting this role that's being offered to me, I will try to turn that into the subject of my work. So the title very much came from that.
Right.
But one also has to remember that actually Dora has been working on the idea of marginality as an artistic device for a few years now. She's been very interested in strategies of counterculture, and historically and also contemporarily. So somehow the two things really fit. And that's when, in the discussion with her, she really thought, okay, well, I can make these two things come together. And so the whole project is very much about studying, presenting today, various aspects of what it is to be marginal and how artists use marginality to protect themselves, to give themselves a space of freedom in their practice, in their production. The exhibition has some historical moments. So actually it includes a Swiss figure, very important, Robert Walser, and his microscripts, the way of writing very, very
Right.
small so that you can't really read it, and actually he would feel that way, that he would have entire freedom because people would not be able to actually read what he had written.
It is difficult to
yes.
read, I can tell you.
To other historical figures like James Joyce, who used nonsense language in order to be able to misguide the reader and somehow explode the expectations of the reader, to historical figures like Italo Svevo. So they're like these kind of literary historical figures, but there are some other figures that are also in this project, because once the process was decided, once the subject was decided, Dora very much thought that she would make one single work, which is an extended performance. So Lo Inadecuado, the inadequate, l'inadequato, is a single performance. It starts on the 1st of June, goes right through to the end of November. And within this single performance, there are around 45 moments, including about 70 participants.
And these participants are all coming from Spain, so this is ongoing, and
Actually,
people are doing performances during Dora's exhibition here.
That's another interesting aspect, because she has to some extent devolved her project to Italy, and she has initiated, so she calls herself the initiator of this single extended performance, which is like a multiple voiced performance. She's the initiator, but the process has been put together through a thinking group of Italian cultural thinkers, and within this thinking group, other invitations have snowballed, and as a result, 70 people were invited. So these 70 people, the majority of them, I would say almost 100% of them, are actually Italian. So Dora is almost the only Spanish person.
Right.
In fact, she's the only Spanish person within this whole project. And she has very much devolved this pavilion. This pavilion is being occupied by a whole series of reflections and investigations about marginality within Italy today. And this is something which is quite characteristic in Dora's work. You're never quite sure whether this is something which has been improvised or which is, totally kind of scripted and precise. And I think this is what makes very often her work very interesting and dynamic, because she's very clear about her ideas, very precise in her structure, but she allows an incredible amount of space and freedom for improvisation and for other sort of things to happen within it.
So literature as well has a very important impact to the art.
Absolutely, and in fact, the format of the book, the format of the narration, text is something which is constantly present, not just in the process.
You can see it in the exhibition here as well, that books and text
are everywhere.
Everywhere.
And she uses these formats as experimental modes to sort of think about her work. Things become books at the end of something. So, for example, at the moment there is a performance called Instant Narrative, which we have here on the stage. This is a performance which happens constantly throughout the entire biennial duration. And it consists of a person who is on a desk on the corner of the stage. And when you enter the pavilion, you sort of look at this person and you think, what are they doing writing on this computer? Strange. Anyway, so then you walk around, and then in one of the peripheral spaces, you suddenly see the screen on which this text is kind of rolling down. And you may see on the screen some sentences that say, this beautiful woman in this beige outfit is looking at me. Maybe if I twinkle my eyes, she will look at me a bit more. And so it's kind of very playful, trying to sort of really talk about what's going on within the space, but suddenly also the person might go off into his own world and suddenly remember, oh gosh, I forgot to call my mum, I've got to call my mum now. So it's sort of navigating in and out between the reality of the space, the reality of the person's consciousness, and maybe some fantasies and fictionality that will come out. This instant narrative with rolling actors who work on it throughout the entire performance, so right through to the end of November, will finalize.
That is another book, maybe.
This will finalize in a book.
Performance.
This will finalize in a book, exactly. So this is another quite traditional way of working for Dora.
Okay, so Katja, Garcia, Anton, thank you very much for your explanations, and have a good time here during the Biennale, and good luck.
Thank you very much.